Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and welcome to ARIRANG News. It's Thursday, November 20th here in Korea, live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Our top story this afternoon, North Korea has lashed out against the passage of a UN draft resolution which calls for the regime to be held responsible for violating human rights. Pyongyang says it's going to strengthen its war deterrent. Ji-yoon has more.
North Korea is angry and is now threatening to conduct more nuclear tests. On Thursday, Pyongyang's foreign ministry issued a statement strongly rejecting a United Nations draft resolution that refers North Korea to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. Calling it a U.S.-led attempt to overthrow the North Korean regime, the ministry said it will no longer refrain from conducting nuclear tests. And it looks like Pyongyang is getting ready to back up its words with action. Satellite imagery taken this month suggests that the North might actually be preparing to reprocess nuclear fuel into weapons with bombing capabilities. Analysis done by the U.S. Research Institute 38 North says the plutonium production reactor at the North's Yongbyon nuclear facility has been shut down for 10 weeks. As to why the reactor was shut down for longer than it needs to be, the institute says that the North seems to be replacing spent fuel rods and preparing to reprocess them. The imagery also shows steam coming from a cooling tower that's consistent with maintenance, testing, and other activities that take place before operations begin. Analysts point out, however, that Pyongyang has gone down this path before. Its nuclear reactors were shut down in 2007 under a disarmament agreement, but last year, North Korea restarted them. Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin, fresh from a meeting with North Korea's special envoy, has been hailing the benefits of maintaining a close relationship with North Korea. Russia's Itar-TASS news agency quotes Putin as saying deepening political as well as economic cooperation with the North will contribute to regional security and stability in both countries. His comments came on Wednesday. That's a day after his meeting with Choi Dong-hae, who is midway through his roughly week-long trip to Russia. Now, Choi Dong-hae and the rest of his delegation are also reportedly scheduled to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Thursday for more talks. And speaking of those economic cooperation, a joint railway project between both Koreas and Russia is picking up the pace. Industry insiders say a South Korean consortium will test a transfer of 35,000 tons of Russian coal from the Najin port in the north to South Korea's southern port of Pohang starting next Monday. The coal will be delivered from Kasan to Najin on the recently renovated 54-kilometer railway. Seoul, which banned investments in North Korea after the regime torpedoed a South Korean warship in 2010, has allowed the consortium to indirectly invest by purchasing Russian stakes in the initiative. Now, the efficiency of the latest venture is said to ultimately determine the future of this trilateral cooperation, as well as President Park Geun-hye's Eurasia initiative. Local police in Paris are looking for a North Korean student. The young man is reported to be a son of an aide to Chang Song-taek, who was purged by Kim Jong-un last year. Our Kwon So-ah has the details.
The North Korean man, who had been studying in Paris for around 3 years, has been missing for more than 2 weeks now. French authorities are taking the case very seriously, considering the male student's close family links to Chang Song-taek, the uncle of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who was purged and swiftly executed late last year. There's speculation the student, only identified by his family name Han, could be on the run from North Korean agents who want to forcefully repatriate him to the north.
We don't know the whereabouts of the student. We are currently assessing how credible this case is.
Han had been studying at the École Nationale Supérieure d'Architecture de Paris, La Villette, an architecture college in the French capital, with 9 other elite students from Pyongyang's prestigious Kim Il-sung University. Given that Han is the son of a reportedly purged aide of Chang Song-taek, there are rumors the North Korean regime is still not done with getting rid of Chang's inner circle and their associates. If the assumptions are found to be true, the case could spark a huge diplomatic row between France and North Korea, especially in the wake of the EU-drafted UN resolution that calls for the North Korean leadership to be brought before the International Criminal Court. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
South Korea has taken a big step forward in building its latest K2 tanks. A crucial part of the tanker can now be produced with 100% homegrown technology. The military says this will help close its numerical shortfall against North Korea. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The last batch of 100 K2 Black Panther tanks installed with the combination of a German-made engine and transmission systems were put into service this year. The combinations are often referred to as power packs. South Korea started developing its own power packs in 2005, but the military knocked them back as they weren't deemed powerful or reliable enough. That is until now. Nearly a decade after development began, Korean power packs are now being fitted to the South Korean military's K2 tanks. The power packs enabled the tank to go from 0 to 32 kilometers an hour in just 8.7 seconds. Officials say that makes them fast enough to evade enemy anti-tank missiles.
The next batch of K2 tanks will fit future battlefield environments as they have enhanced mobility, firepower, and defense features.
North Korea has a sizable advantage over South Korea when it comes to the number of tanks it has, but most are believed to be antiquated. The North Korean military has 3,500 tanks at its disposal. The South just 2,400. Seoul plans to reduce the numerical gap by dispatching these latest tanks.
K2 tanks are far more advanced than the previous K1, so when they are fully deployed, South Korea will have the North Korean military on its toes.
The South Korean military says K2 Black Panther tanks will be in service by 2017. Officials hope to also sell the K2 to overseas buyers in the coming years. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Now, over at the presidential office, President Park Geun-hye has started talks with the ruling party leadership on this Thursday. It's the first time they are meeting since September, and President Park is expected to seek support for a swift parliamentary passage of FTAs with Australia and Canada and a ratification of FTAs recently concluded with New Zealand and China. She will then likely seek ways to promptly pass a bill on reforming the public employee pension system, which she hopes to see completed by the end of this year. Now, also on the agenda will be a series of economy-related bills and next year's budget, with some 10 days left until the passage deadline in the current regular session. The opposition party, in the meantime, turned down the president's offer for talks today, saying now is the time for the two main parties to focus on passing the bills rather than meeting the president. With deflation woes mounting, local research institutions continue to lower Korea's economic growth forecasts for this year and for 2015 as well. They say inflation will stay in the 1% range next year, lower than the government's outlook of 2%. Our Song Ji-sun has more.
Slow growth and low inflation are making it hard for Seoul to reach its growth forecast this year. Korea's economic recovery has lost momentum since April's deadly ferry disaster, which dented domestic sentiment, and it appears the trend may continue well into next year. In July, Seoul slashed its growth forecast for this year from 4.1 to 3.7%. But that's still higher than the market median, which stands at 3.5%, according to financial data released Thursday. It's the same story for next year's growth outlook. While the Korean economy is expected to grow at a relatively faster rate compared to this year, the Korean government stands alone with a forecast of 4%, with others expecting the figure to fall in the 3% range. The inflation forecast for next year from private institutions rests in the 1% range, nearly a percentage point below the government's outlook. That suggests the inflation will hover in the 1% range for the third consecutive year. Slowing domestic demand coupled with falling oil prices will only compound the issue, which may sound like a good news for consumers, but not in the long run.
Once prices continue to fall, both consumption and investments shrink on expectations they will fall even more, leading to further deflation. To avoid such a recession, the government must facilitate the domestic economy in a way that boosts both growth and prices.
A weak Japanese yen, slowing growth in China, as well as an end to U.S. quantitative easing are also casting a shadow on the Korean economy as downside risks for the coming year. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korea's total and short-term foreign debt are on a downward trend spurred by the weakened local currency against the greenback. Korean investments overseas have also exceeded foreign investments at home for the first time. Our Hwang Ji-hye explains what this means.
New figures show that Korean banks are now less vulnerable to external shocks. The Bank of Korea says that the total foreign debt stood at around $430 billion as of the end of September, down roughly $13 billion from the amount recorded 3 months ago. During the same period, Korea's short-term foreign debt also fell for the first time this year to $126.1 billion, down $5.7 billion. The ratio of the short-term foreign debt against the country's total foreign debt went down 0.4 percentage points as of the end of September to 29.4% from the end of June. Short-term foreign debt is considered as one of the three major indicators, along with foreign exchange reserves and current account balance, that measures a country's ability to pay back its foreign debts. While the new numbers show that Korea now stands in a better position in terms of paying back its debts overseas, the finance ministry says that the drop largely stems from the weakening local currency against the greenback. Korean investments overseas also outpaced foreign investments in Korea for the first time ever as of the end of September. The total of Korean investments abroad stood at $1.05 trillion, with foreign investments in Korea at $1.02 trillion. Hwang Ji-hye, 아리랑 뉴스.
The global tablet PC market is expected to bounce back with double-digit sales growth next year. U.S.-based market tracker Strategy Analytics says the market will surge by 18% in 2015 with the appearance of low-priced tablets with larger screens. That's quite a jump from the 9% growth forecast this year compared to last. And speaking of the low-priced tablet PCs, in the third quarter this year, Apple and Samsung Electronics saw their market shares slip slightly. A low-priced Chinese-made tablet called White Box came out on top, taking 30% of the global share. Now, insects are starting to be viewed in a different light here in Korea as they help local farmers produce more fruits and vegetables. And with that trend, the insect industry is expected to boom in the near future. Kim Min-ji explains.
Bumblebees are used for cross-pollination in fruits and vegetables that don't contain honey, such as tomatoes or eggplants. But Korea did not have the technological capabilities to artificially produce the insects, which naturally nest underground, and had to rely on imports until 2002. It's a different story now after successfully mastering artificial breeding. Of 80,000 boxes, each containing about 80 bumblebees, that were used on farms for cross-pollination last year, 70,000 were produced locally.
During the flowering season, some plants do not bear fruit because of the cold temperatures. But by using bumblebees, we can raise the seed-setting rate.
While insects are being used to help local farmers, they are also being used for food. The darkling beetle and the larvae of the white-spotted flower chafer, for example, have been approved by the government to be used for consumption. Larvae in particular can be made into a selection of foods from cookies and salads to skewered foods.
If we see the overall distribution of nutrients, there is a mixture of carbohydrate, protein, and fats. It is similar in content to that of eggs.
The insects are not just used for food but cosmetics as well. And it's a market that's expected to grow to $630 million by 2020. 김민지, ARIRANG News.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
It's only the third week of November, but a snowstorm has hit New York State, killing at least 7 in the United States. And residents in Buffalo regions are bracing themselves for a year's worth of snow over a period of just 3 days. Connie Lee reports.
New York is bracing for more snow as residents are still recovering from this week's deadly blizzard. At least 7 people were killed from being buried in the snow, traffic accidents, or heart problems. As some residents start to dig themselves out from the massive snowbanks, New York's governor is urging residents to stay indoors.
When we say stay home, really stay home. Going out on the roads is dangerous. It's unnecessary. You're not going to get anywhere. You will get stuck, and then you will further complicate the situation.
More than 100 National Guard members have been deployed to help clear the roads and remove abandoned vehicles. Dozens of cars were stranded all around the state on Wednesday, with some passengers being stuck for nearly 30 hours before being rescued. Buffalo, New York State's second most populous city, was hardest hit with about 1.5 meters of snow. The National Weather Service predicts that some areas could break single-day records for snowfall. This early cold blast of winter has actually affected much of the country. Officials say all 50 U.S. states had areas that hit the freezing point on Tuesday, and the southern and northeast regions are expecting more record-breaking cold temperatures in the coming days. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And coming back to Korea, in just about 3 weeks' time, leaders from 10 ASEAN countries will be here in Korea for a special meeting with President Park Geun-hye. The event is being held to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Korea's relations with ASEAN. Hwang Sung-hee has more.
The 2014 ASEAN ROK Commemorative Summit will kick off in Busan on December 11th. The two-day meeting invites leaders from 10 Association of Southeast Asian Nations member countries, like Myanmar and the Philippines. Up for discussion are ways to expand cooperation between Korea and the ASEAN countries, as well as global issues such as climate change and disaster relief measures. Since establishing diplomatic ties in 1989, ASEAN has become Korea's second-largest trade partner and investment destination. The region is also one of the most popular vacation hotspots, with over 4 million Koreans visiting the bloc every year. The commemorative summit is expected to further bolster the relationship.
Last year, President Park Geun-hye proposed a vision for partnership for trust and happiness in defining Korea-ASEAN relations for the future. The commemorative summit will present a comprehensive blueprint to realize this goal and will be an opportunity to celebrate 25 years of friendship between Korea and ASEAN.
The leaders will engage in bilateral meetings and enjoy a welcoming dinner on the first day of the event. The ASEAN ROK Commemorative Summit will take place on the second day, followed by a joint press conference. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
The thought of going to prison is scary to most of us, if not all, but if it's a simulated prison cell, it might be less intimidating. And our Park Ji-won says there are, in fact, many people out there who voluntarily lock themselves up. Take a look.
People from all corners of the country arrive at this center in the town of Hongcheon, about 2 hours to the east of Seoul, for a couple of days of rest and relaxation. They change their clothes and turn in their personal belongings, including their mobile phones. Participants learn how to relax their bodies and meditate at a mountain. However, that's not all. This program is called Prison Inside Me, and there's a reason.
The most special feature of the program is that participants spend the night in this prison cell alone. In this setting, totally disconnected from the outside world, people can access their deepest state of mind and relieve stress while reflecting on their own lives in peace and quiet.
The center offers dozens of rooms that resemble prison cells, where people willingly lock themselves up to ponder their lives without distractions or interruptions. Since the center opened last year, several hundred people have stayed here.
I feel more somber, as all the distracting thoughts inside me disappear, as I empty my mind.
But why prison?
I first came up with the idea when I was working as a prosecutor. I was totally exhausted and wanted to spend some time alone in prison to rearrange my life.
It's said everyone has their own prison inside them and that they live under its influences. We hope this program gives people time to reflect about the restraints they live under and how to free themselves from them.
For those seeking to regain a balance in life again, a couple of days outside of their ordinary lives can provide a restart button for their weary minds and bodies. Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
A picture can say 1,000 words, but it's the story these words tell that's truly important. The annual Seoul Photo Festival has quite the story to tell about Korea's capital city of Seoul, and our Im Yoon-hee took a closer look at this year's edition.
It's hard to imagine as cars whiz by in a city that over 10 million call home, a different landscape. There are hundreds of offices, museums and structures crowded here in the capital. But decades ago, most of these buildings weren't here. And the ones that were, well, they've withstood the test of time and now represent the rich history within the city. These are the pictures of our capital. They're the pictures of our Seoul.
Photography first entered Korea in the beginning of the 1880s, and since then, we've been able to document pictures of Seoul. This year marks the 620th year since Seoul has been considered the capital, and for over 500 years during the Joseon dynasty, there wasn't much change to the circular structure. But after foreign influences entered, everything from the shape of the city to the style of architecture changed.
And it was these foreign influences that drove the direction of Seoul for the next 50 years. During the Joseon dynasty, Seoul was actually called Hanseong. But with the trickling in of Western culture, buildings began to show a much different style. And when Japan invaded, Hanseong became Gyeongseong, and the streets really began to reflect physical changes. Although foreign influence crept in even more and more, there was still a strong presence of a traditional Korea, and the struggle between the two was evident throughout the city. It wasn't until the sudden destruction of the Korean War, a war that almost wiped the slate clean, that Gyeongseong became Seoul, and the capital of Korea saw an explosion of transformation.
After the Korean War, the need for reconstruction was immediate, so everything happened quickly. And that's how the modern Seoul began. Things like the Namsan cable car and the 6-3 building were raised as a result of the industrial development that gripped the city, leading to economic growth and ultimately the development of Korea.
Along the way, sacrifices were made in order to reveal some of Seoul's most beautiful attributes. And now that the dust has settled, the result is a city of splendor and of endless possibility. The colors of Korea will always keep changing, shining a bright light on the future ahead. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 6 p.m. Korea time.